Throughout his entire life, Leo Tolstoy discovered a fascinating paradox. Those with the deepest spiritual insight often abandon material wealth and never praise the rich. But why? To understand this, we need to start with a fundamental question posed by philosopher Emerson. Why do people want to be rich? Why do they need expensive horses, beautiful clothes, luxurious apartments, access to exclusive venues, and fancy entertainment? Simply because they lack spiritual life. This is the key to understanding Tolstoy's entire worldview. He realized that the problem isn't whether you have money or not, it's about the motivation behind seeking wealth. Tolstoy defined greed very clearly. The sin of greed consists of accumulating more and more possessions or money that others need, and keeping them so you can control other people's labor at will. This insight isn't just about economics, it goes much deeper, touching on spirituality itself. When someone accumulates wealth beyond their real needs, what are they actually doing? They're taking what belongs to others, creating injustice, and most importantly building a wall between themselves and God. This is why enlightened people, those who can sense the divine presence in all living beings, cannot accept the accumulation of wealth. It's not because they hate money, but because they understand that excess wealth is the greatest barrier preventing them from accessing true spiritual essence. Tolstoy himself, a wealthy count, struggled with this his entire life. Despite having everything society considers success, fame, fortune, status, he still felt empty and tormented. Only when he began letting go of his attachment to wealth did he find true peace. Here's the most important discovery we'll explore. Enlightened people don't abandon wealth because they're poor or powerless, quite the opposite. They let it go because they've seen a treasure far greater than anything material wealth could offer. Through years of observation and experience, Tolstoy identified 8 profound reasons why enlightened people cannot accept the accumulation of wealth. First, wealth hinders the soul's progress. Tolstoy quoted philosopher Demophilos, "Just as heavy clothing impedes the body's movement, wealth obstructs the soul's progress. The more wealth one has, the greater the worries become, and the further one drifts from spiritual life." Second, love cannot coexist with riches. Tolstoy wrote, "Storing treasures in heaven means increasing the love within you, and love is incompatible with wealth. It's completely opposed to it. A person living a life of love cannot accumulate wealth, or if they do, they cannot keep it. Because love always compels us to share, to give, not to hoard for ourselves." Third, the structural injustice between rich and poor. Tolstoy quoted Henry George's assertion, "The rich and poor complement each other. If there are rich people, there must also be poor people. If there is meaningless luxury, there must also exist terrible deprivation that forces the poor to serve that meaningless luxury." Enlightened people clearly see that the wealth of the few is always connected to the suffering of the many. Fourth, wealth weakens our capacity for enjoyment. Tolstoy observed, "The more we try to increase pleasure by inventing refined foods, the weaker the stomach becomes, and the less enjoyment we get from eating. The wealthy have everything but lose the ability to truly enjoy it, while the poor find happiness in simple things." Fifth, wealth leads to spiritual isolation. The life of the rich is terrible because they cannot associate with many people, only with other rich people like themselves. They cannot associate with the poor. If they befriend the poor, they would clearly see their own guilt. Wealth builds invisible walls, separating people from their fellow human beings. Sixth, the internal contradiction of material satisfaction. Tolstoy told of a wealthy person so tired of luxury that they envied a hungry beggar. He wrote, "The poor envy the rich envy the poor. The poor are better off because they're usually not at fault for their poverty, but the rich must always take responsibility for their wealth." Seventh, abandoning wealth is a condition for love. As Jesus said, "Go, sell everything you have, and give to the poor. Then come follow me." Tolstoy explained, "If love is strong, it's expressed not just in words but in actions. and a wealthy person can express love through action by abandoning their wealth. 8th, wealth prevents recognition of God. Tolstoy wrote, "The more one abandons the physical self, the more God reveals himself in that person. The body conceals God within us." Epictetus also taught, "Abandon everything that doesn't belong to us." Abandon love of wealth, glory, status, honor, because wealth feeds the material ego, causing people to lose touch with their spiritual essence. These are the 8 fundamental reasons. Enlightened people don't abandon wealth because of poverty, but because they clearly see the harm that wealth inflicts on the soul. Tolstoy didn't just reveal why enlightened people abandon wealth, he also exposed the illusions that society constructs to justify inequality. He identified 3 major misconceptions clouding human minds. The first misconception is the illusion of economic justice. When a new science emerged called political economy, people began explaining everything through supply and demand. Capital, income, wages, market value, profit. It sounds scientific and rational, but Tolstoy saw the darkness lurking beneath. He wrote, "This can only explain the state of blind mentality of kind-hearted people in modern society, who can sincerely pity dumb animals, but calmly devour the lives of their fellow human beings. This is the horror. When complex theories become tools to justify injustice, human conscience gradually becomes numb. People can shed tears seeing a dog being beaten, yet casually wear clothes made from the sweat and stolen childhoods of children in distant places." The second misconception is the justification for inequality. Here, Eastern wisdom rings out through Lao Tzu's words, "Honest people are usually not wealthy. Wealthy people are usually not honest." It sounds extreme, but Tolstoy recognized this as a painful truth. In a society that worships wealth, honest people, those who refuse to exploit others, rarely become rich. Conversely, to accumulate massive wealth, people often must take paths that aren't entirely clean. The Russians have a bitter proverb, "Wealth is a great sin before God. Poverty is a great sin before man." Here we see a contradiction. Spirituality considers excessive accumulation, while others lack as sinful. But society views poverty as failure, as shame. The third misconception is the illusion of material happiness. Schopenhauer once said, "People worry about increasing wealth 1,000 times more than increasing knowledge." Yet, it's obvious to anyone that human happiness depends much more on what's within a person than what they possess. This is a bitter paradox. Why do we spend nearly our entire lives worrying about money, yet rarely care for developing our souls, intellect, and love? Tolstoy clearly saw this value inversion. We chase things that never bring true happiness while abandoning what's most precious. Look around. Are the richest people always the happiest? Usually not. They have money but are filled with anxiety, have possessions but lack peace. They can buy everything on the market, but cannot buy genuine love or tranquility of soul. So why do these illusions exist? Tolstoy understood they don't exist naturally, but are constructed and maintained by those who benefit from injustice. When people believe wealth is the measure of success, they'll work tirelessly to serve the rich. When they believe poverty results from laziness, they won't dare question the system. But enlightened people are different. They see through these veils of deception. They know true happiness doesn't come from wealth, but from love, inner peace, and a life connected to spiritual essence. Therefore, they don't just abandon wealth, they refuse to praise the wealthy. Because praising the wealthy means being complicit in the illusion, contributing to maintaining a deceptive game. This is also why Tolstoy said, "Enlightened people often become lonely in society not because they want to separate themselves, but because they cannot participate in a game they know is unjust and deceptive." Many people, when hearing about abandoning wealth, immediately think of images of the weak, fearful, running away from reality. But Tolstoy shows us a completely different perspective. Abandoning wealth isn't an act of the weak, but an act of the strongest people. those brave enough to live according to the truth they've seen. Let's look at Francis of Assisi, someone Tolstoy greatly admired. Francis was born into a wealthy merchant family and could have enjoyed all the luxuries of life, but he chose a different path. There's a story that Tolstoy particularly loved. Francis and brother Leo were walking on the road from Perugia to Porziuncola on a cold winter day. Francis called to Leo and said, "Brother Leo, even if God grants us brothers the ability to be an example of holy living throughout the world, remember that perfect joy doesn't lie there." They continued walking, and Francis said again, "Also remember, brother Leo, that even if we brothers could heal the sick, cast out demons, give sight to the blind, even raise someone who's been dead for 4 days, remember that perfect joy doesn't lie there either." Finally, Francis said, "And remember once more, brother Leo, even if we could speak the language of angels, understand the orbits of stars, and if the treasures of earth were opened to us along with all the mysteries of birds, fish, animals, humans, trees, stones, and water, remember that even there is no perfect joy." So what is perfect joy? According to Francis, perfect joy is enduring undeserved reproach, and even enduring physical harm without feeling hostility toward the cause of that reproach and suffering. This is active renunciation. Francis didn't abandon wealth out of fear or weakness, but because he found a higher joy, the joy of unconditional love, of complete freedom from all material constraints. Tolstoy pointed out that there are 2 ways to escape poverty. One is to increase possessions, the other is to teach yourself to be content with little. Increasing possessions isn't always feasible and can rarely be done honestly. Reducing desires is always within your power and always good for the soul. Looking at this statement, we see that knowing enough isn't passive acceptance, but active choice. It's the wisdom of recognizing that true happiness doesn't come from having more, but from needing less. Imagine 2 people who both have $100,000. The first person wants $1 million, he feels poor and miserable. The second person only needs $50,000 to live. He feels wealthy and can share the rest. Who is truly rich? Tolstoy himself was a living example of this struggle. He was born a count, with everything society considers, success, wealth, fame, social status. But throughout his life, he was a long chain of conflict between the demands of body and soul. What's remarkable is that in his later years, when he learned to let go of attachment to wealth, he said that life is a great gift. This shows a profound shift in his view of life. Tolstoy realized he wasn't unhappy because he lacked wealth, he had plenty of wealth, but because he was too attached to it. Only when he began to let go did he find true peace. There's a fundamental difference between someone who avoids wealth out of fear and someone who abandons wealth through enlightenment. The person who avoids out of fear is still haunted by wealth. They think about it, crave it. They just don't dare pursue it. They still believe wealth would bring happiness. They just feel unworthy or incapable. In contrast, enlightened people abandon wealth because they've clearly seen that wealth cannot bring true happiness. They don't crave it, don't fear it, they simply don't need it. Like how adults don't crave children's toys not out of fear, but because they've moved beyond that stage. Tolstoy understood that true freedom isn't the ability to buy everything you want, but being unbound by desire. The less you indulge the body in terms of food, clothing, housing, and entertainment, the freer life becomes. Conversely, as soon as you start trying to improve food, clothing, housing, and entertainment, there will be no limit to your effort and worry. This is the key to liberation. When you no longer need many things, you no longer have to worry about making money, protecting assets, competing with others. You're free to focus on what truly matters: spiritual development, loving others, contributing to making the world better. This is exactly why enlightened people abandon wealth. Not because they're weak or afraid, but because they've found a treasure far greater, the treasure of spiritual freedom, unconditional love, and inner peace that nothing can destroy. What Tolstoy discovered wasn't just about abandoning wealth, but a complete revolution in how we view value. This isn't a simple change, but a profound transformation in consciousness, from living for the material to living for the spiritual. A Hindu proverb that Tolstoy particularly loved says, "Seek those riches that no one can take from you, that will remain with you even after death, that will not decay. Such riches are your soul." Let's pause and reflect on this. Everything we're chasing, money, possessions, fame, all of it can be lost in a single day. An economic crisis, an accident, an illness, and everything can vanish. But there's one thing no one can take away: what you become inside. The love you develop, the wisdom you accumulate, the peace you find, these go with you, whether you're rich or poor, whether you live or die. This is the true wealth that enlightened people pursue. Tolstoy had a very unique perspective on wealth. He said, "Increasing real wealth means increasing love." Sounds strange, doesn't it? But think deeper. When you increase the love in your heart, you truly become richer. You have more joy seeing others happy. You have more peace because you're no longer jealous or envious. You have more freedom because you're no longer bound by greed. Conversely, when you only increase material wealth without increasing love, you actually become poorer. You have more anxiety about protecting assets. You have fewer real friends because people might only approach you for money. You have less pure joy because you're always suspicious of others' motives. One of the most profound teachings Tolstoy quoted from Jesus is, "Don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about its own things. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble." This doesn't mean we shouldn't plan or prepare for the future. The deeper meaning is, don't let worry about the future steal the peace of the present. Where does most of our suffering come from? Not from what's happening right now, but from what might happen in the future. What if I lose my job? What if I get sick? What if the economy crashes? Enlightened people learn to live in the present. They do well what can be done today, and trust that tomorrow will take care of itself. This isn't irresponsibility, but a deep trust in the cosmic order. Perhaps the most important consciousness shift Tolstoy spoke of is moving from the question, "What can I get?" to, "What can I give?" Pascal wrote, "Our own will is never satisfied, but as soon as we abandon it, we feel completely content. Only by living for all can you live without living for yourself. Only by living for all can a person be and remain at peace." This is one of life's most profound paradoxes. When you live for yourself, you're never satisfied. No matter how much you get, you always want more. But when you live to serve others, you find a joy and satisfaction that nothing can compare to. Epictetus taught a very practical lesson. If you expect nothing or don't try to get anything from others, people won't make you afraid. But if your happiness lies in others' power, you'll always fear people. This is the core of spiritual freedom. When your happiness depends on what you might lose: money, fame, others' approval, you'll always live in fear. But when your happiness comes from what no one can take away: love, inner peace, connection with the divine, you're truly free. In the material world, success is defined by what you accumulate: money, possessions, status. Failure is not having these things. But in the spiritual world, success is defined by what you become. You become more loving, wiser, more peaceful. Failure is when you let greed, anger, and fear control your life. From this perspective, a poor person who lives with love and peace is more successful than a millionaire living in anxiety and loneliness. What's important to understand is that shifting consciousness from material to spiritual doesn't mean completely abandoning the material world. Tolstoy didn't encourage everyone to become beggars or live in caves. He meant we need to change our relationship with the material world. Instead of letting it control our lives, we use it as a tool to serve higher purposes. An enlightened person may have money, but they're not controlled by money. They may have possessions, but they're ready to share when necessary. They may participate in society, but they don't let society define their worth. This is the consciousness revolution Tolstoy wanted to convey. From living to have more, to living to become more. From measuring success by wealth to measuring it by love. From living in fear of loss to living in faith and hope. This isn't just a personal change, but the foundation for a better society. A society where people are valued for what they contribute, not what they own. To understand Tolstoy's perspective more deeply, we need to look at specific examples, people who succeeded and failed in handling their relationship with wealth. Through these stories, we'll see clearly the difference between two completely opposing ways of life. Tolstoy often quoted a story from the Gospel of Luke about a wealthy man. This isn't just a religious story, but a vivid portrait of the psychology of those controlled by wealth. This man had fertile land and abundant harvests. Instead of sharing with those in need, he said to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain and goods." Then he said to his soul, "Soul, you have plenty of goods laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry." But then God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared?" This story isn't just about sudden death. It speaks of a deeper tragedy. This man confused himself with his possessions. He thought accumulating wealth would bring safety and happiness, but in reality, it only created an illusion of security. Tolstoy tells of another wealthy man, someone who had everything society considers success, yet felt tired of life. He sat all day in his magnificent mansion, sighing and complaining about boredom. The only remaining pleasure was eating. But even this joy was lost. He ate so much that he damaged his digestive system and lost his appetite. He had to see doctors, take medicine, and walk 2 hours daily as prescribed. While walking, a beggar approached. "Have mercy, sir, I haven't eaten all day." The wealthy man initially didn't hear, too absorbed in his own suffering, but when he heard about food, he stopped. "You want to eat?" "Very much, sir, very much." "How fortunate." The wealthy man thought silently and envied the beggar. Tolstoy concluded, "The poor envy the rich envy the poor. The poor are better off because they're usually not at fault for their poverty, but the rich must always take responsibility for their wealth." This is a painful paradox. The person who has everything yearns for the hunger of someone who has nothing. Contrasting these negative examples, Tolstoy tells a very moving story about a humble farmer. A monk was seeking salvation in the desert. He constantly read prayers, waking twice each night to pray. A farmer provided food for him. The monk began doubting whether such a life was good. He went to an old saint for advice. After hearing about the monk's life, the saint said, "Everything you do is good, but go see how the farmer lives, the one who brings you food. Perhaps you can learn something from him." The monk went and observed the farmer for a day and night. The farmer woke early, his only prayer being, "Lord." Then he worked all day, plowing fields. Evening came home, before sleeping. He again said, "Lord." The monk thought, "There's nothing to learn from him. He doesn't think about God, only mentions him twice a day." When the monk reported back, the old saint gave him a cup of oil and said, "Take this cup of oil around the village and return, but don't spill a single drop." The monk did as instructed, and when he returned, the saint asked, "How many times did you remember God while carrying the oil?" The monk admitted he didn't remember God once. "I was only focused on not spilling the oil." The saint rebuked, "Just 1 cup of oil occupied your entire mind so that you didn't think of God once." The farmer feeds his family, himself, and you with his labor and care. Yet twice he remembered God. Through these stories, we see clearly the fundamental difference between two ways of living. Negative people live to accumulate, to protect, to enjoy. They think happiness comes from having more, but the result is they become isolated, anxious, and ultimately empty. Positive people live to serve, to share, to contribute. They understand happiness comes from giving, and the result is they find meaning, peace, and true joy. Francis of Assisi is the perfect model that Tolstoy admired. Francis was born into a wealthy merchant family but chose a different path. What's special about Francis is that he didn't just abandon wealth, he found joy in the very act of abandonment. He didn't see it as sacrifice or loss, but as liberation. Francis taught that perfect joy is enduring undeserved reproach, and even enduring physical harm without feeling hostility toward the cause of that reproach and suffering. This isn't passivity or weakness. This is the power of unconditional love, a power that no wealth can buy. Returning to the farmer in the story, we see he possessed a treasure that even the ascetic monk didn't have: simplicity and naturalness in his relationship with the divine. He didn't need to stay up late or wake early to prove his devotion. He lived a life of honest labor, fed his family, and helped others, and in that found God. This is exactly what enlightened people understand. God isn't in lavish temples or complex rituals, but in simple love, humble service, and sharing with others. Through these examples, Tolstoy wants us to see that the struggle isn't between rich and poor, but between two ways of living: living for yourself or living for others, living to accumulate or living to share, living in fear or living in love. And those who choose the second path, whether they have money or not, are the truly wealthy ones, those who have found the treasure that no thief can steal. After understanding why enlightened people abandon wealth, the question becomes, how do we practice this in daily life? Tolstoy didn't just offer theory, he pointed out concrete steps. First, the issue isn't whether you have wealth or not, but your attitude toward what you're holding. He said, "A thief isn't someone who takes what they need, but someone who hoards excess while others lack." Look around your house. How much do you truly need? And how much sits forgotten while others could use it? That old coat, the book you've finished reading, the bicycle your child outgrew, all could bring joy to others, if you knew how to give. Tolstoy emphasized the principle of modest living. The less you indulge in food, clothing, housing, and entertainment, the freer life becomes. Conversely, if you keep trying to upgrade, you'll fall into an endless loop. Learning to be content with less breaks the chains of desire. The key is distinguishing need from want. You need food to live, but not lavish banquets. You need a roof for shelter, but not necessarily a mansion. You need clothes to wear, but not a closet full of designer labels. When you honestly ask the question, you'll find many things you thought you needed are really just wants. Next is the art of giving. Love isn't just expressed in words but in actions, and one of the clearest actions is sharing wealth. Start small. When you buy something new, give away something old. When you eat well, think of those going hungry. When you have surplus, share it. Tolstoy also advised expanding our circle of concern, from the small I to family, community, world, and finally to the universal order of the cosmos. This is how to live for all and find peace. Another practice is remembering impermanence. Wealth doesn't follow us forever. If you knew you had only one day left to live, you'd choose to speak words of love, make peace, or help others not worry about shopping or status. So why wait until the final moment? Tolstoy also warned about social judgment. Others might think you're strange or unambitious. But true value doesn't lie in external recognition, but in living according to your conscience and deeper principles. Finally, he offered daily exercises. Each morning ask, "What can I give today?" Examine. Before meals, remember those who are hungry. When working, think of the common good, not just your salary. Each evening, examine whether you lived for yourself or for others. Tolstoy reminded us this isn't a path for superhumans, but for anyone brave enough to face truth and change through small steps. Each time you choose to share instead of hoard, simplicity instead of complexity, giving instead of keeping, you're moving closer to true freedom. Ultimately, you'll understand. Life isn't about how much you possess, but about who you become. These teachings offer practical wisdom, though it's worth noting that implementing such radical changes requires careful consideration of one's circumstances and responsibilities. The core insight, shifting from accumulation to contribution, can be adapted to different life situations without necessarily requiring extreme material renunciation. We've taken a long journey with Tolstoy, from understanding why enlightened people abandon wealth to how to practice this in daily life. And now, the final message: the transformation from control to liberation. Most people believe money and possessions help us control our lives, but in reality, wealth controls people. The wealthy often live in anxiety, fear of loss, fear of being deceived, fear of not knowing who's genuine. They don't control wealth, they're bound by it. Tolstoy pointed out that freedom doesn't lie in the ability to buy everything, but in not being bound by desire. Someone who always wants more, however wealthy, remains a slave to appetite. A person with little wealth, but who knows, contentment is truly free. They can sleep peacefully, trust others, and enjoy life's simple pleasures. Tolstoy himself was born into luxury, yet spent years torn by suffering. Only when he let go of fame and wealth did he see life is a great gift. This was his transformation from viewing life as a burden to seeing it as grace. In today's society, this is especially worth contemplating. We're taught that happiness can be bought through consumption and status. But in reality, the wealthiest places aren't necessarily the happiest. The more people have, the more they feel they lack. The path of liberation Tolstoy showed isn't poverty or asceticism, but changing our relationship with wealth, not letting it define us, but living based on values, sharing instead of accumulating, cooperating instead of competing, loving instead of fearing. True treasure cannot be stolen. It's love, wisdom, compassion, and peace of mind. When you invest in these things, you no longer worry about loss, because they belong to you forever. The paradox is that when you stop chasing wealth, it often finds you. But then it's merely a tool, no longer the goal. Tolstoy called us not to become hermits or beggars, but to become free people, free from ambition, able to love unconditionally and live according to noble values. If enough people understand that happiness comes from giving, this world would change, based on compassion instead of competition, on sharing instead of hoarding. His final message isn't about abandonment, but about discovery, the treasure of spiritual freedom, of love and peace. Enlightened people abandon wealth not because they're poor or weak, but because they've found their true selves, not the ego measured by possessions, but the self defined by the love they give. When you reach this point, you'll understand why Tolstoy said, "Life is a great gift," because only in giving do you receive back something more valuable than anything money can buy. This is Tolstoy's legacy, the path from control to liberation, from ownership to freedom, from accumulation to love, a path that anyone, rich or poor, can walk. While Tolstoy's insights offer profound wisdom about the relationship between material wealth and spiritual fulfillment, it's worth noting that his approach represents one philosophical perspective among many. The practical application of these ideas varies greatly depending on individual circumstances, cultural context, and personal responsibilities. His emphasis on the connection between spiritual growth and material detachment has influenced many thinkers, though implementing such principles requires careful consideration of one's specific situation and the well-being of dependents.